How are you? As we said, I'm Alison Morris and I'm the security correspondent and columnist with the Irish News. Myself and Megan have had a chat earlier, but this is the first time I've got to see her, so it's lovely to see your lovely face as well before we start. Megan, can you just start and take us back to 2016, how you found out that these images had been shared online?
I got a message on Facebook. Basically, I saw them being uploaded onto people's statuses. They were shared all over social media. I was sent countless links. They were sent to my friends, my family, anyone you can think of were sent these images. They were shared in the tens of thousands of times, I would say. Then the Facebook messages came calling me every name under the sun, slut shaming, telling me to kill myself. That was all part of that. And then I did try. So that's basically the story of how I found out about them.
When you first seen these images, did you try immediately to report them to the social media platforms that they were being shared on?
Oh yeah, of course. I tried to report them to Facebook. I actually had multiple people, my friends and people who I knew, tried to report them countless times, but they were still up a day later. So there was it was a great issue trying to get them taken down. And then the people who uploaded them then also wouldn't delete them either, even after being told how damaging it was. So there's really a big responsibility on social media platforms as well to take something like this seriously.
And can you also explain, because for anyone who's never experienced this kind of abuse, the fact is that even if these social media platforms remove the post that you have reported, it is like playing a game of whack-a-mole, isn't it? Because no sooner does that disappear than it appears somewhere else. And we do know from other high-profile cases, including children, that there is a way that they can block these images altogether, but very rarely do it. And so you're left as the person who has to proactively chase around the internet looking for pictures of yourself to report.
Yeah, definitely. That's a huge issue. I know some other people who have been impacted by this way worse than me as well. And it always kind of boils down to that we're just not doing enough. The issue is that Google and other bit large companies even allow websites that only host image-based sexual abuse to be allowed up with no worries as to who's posted or what was taken down. Like the leak we saw last year, it's a huge issue and it's so widespread in the number of people impacted in these websites alone. Is shocking. And then you have forums like Reddit and other websites as well. So to be honest, it's the internet in general. We need proper safeguards and laws around even for the websites and what they're allowed to host.
And these websites are often revenue producing as well. So they are making money from the amount of hits that they get on them. They're also selling advertising on the back of the amount of traffic that they have going through them. So in effect, are profiting not just from the crimes that were committed against you, but in often cases of child pornography, as well as the fact that they are using images which have been shared without consent and are breaking the law, but are also using those to make money. And yet there's no regulation or no proper regulation of those sites at all, is there?
No, and the problem is when your images get shared, they're kind of just out there then. It's very difficult to try get them removed. The only thing you can do is called a DCMA report. But when I was trying to report them, I was just getting abuse back. Even when my images were obviously being monetized. They were behind a paywall, some of them. So we just need better regulations in place for all of that side. I think there's talks, I know there was in the Republic anyway, there was talks of introducing a law next year that would hold these social media companies to account if they allowed harmful things to stay on the website after being reported, and they'd actually have to face criminal action. But it's whether that will be implemented now or not.
Yeah, and it is something that people have been lobbying, both politically in the South and both here in Northern Ireland and in the UK for, because as a newspaper journalist, if I print something which is libelous or untrue, the publication I work for is held to account for that. But we know that these social media platforms, the abuse of you, which was devastating to your mental health, there is no proper regulation, and there doesn't seem any will either to properly regulate these social media platforms, especially when it comes to abuse against women.
Yeah, well, when you look at the level of the leak, so There was 45 links we sent to the guards. I think there was more in the end, but 45 links. In just 2 of those links, we had 245,000 images of all women. Nobody saw one man in these. So the level of images and files is countless, and the level of websites, it's just unstoppable. And until there is regulations there, and there's some software that can kind of detect images, even if we go under copyright, that can be taken down, because music companies have no issue removing a song as soon as it goes up. So why can't we use that now to push for progressive change and stop it happening altogether?
And explain just what happened when you reported then this abuse to police. And at this stage, obviously, you had gathered together as much evidence as you possibly could before you went to the guards and tried to report that. And what was their response initially to that? So
I actually didn't go about my own case because I was just told it's your own fault. Shouldn't have taken the images, which is besides the point. It's about consent. But I didn't go about my own case. But a few months later, there was a forum with my images and a ton of other young girls' images posted. Some underage, some not. But I gathered them together and I brought them to the guards. And I said, look, we are all impacted by this. And basically they just said that there was nothing that they could do. I think they actually said to one of the girls who was underage that she shouldn't have taken the photos as well. So it just wasn't taken seriously whatsoever. And then I had, all of them were greatly impacted by this. You know, like some of them were photos that they didn't even know existed because they hadn't taken them themselves. So it's a conversation, I think, and training really needs to be given. I don't think the guards are prepared for the level that's going to hit them, because the law comes into action probably around this week. So I don't think that they're ready for the level of how serious this is going to be. And I mean, that is the issue in relation to these pictures, because often when you're dealing with someone, whether they be from the guards, the PSNI, or any other police force, the fact that the attitude towards a lot of these images would be, well, why did you take them in the first place? Why are they there in the first place, when they're often shared within an intimate relationship where they're intended to be for one person, and then, or as you say, in many cases where I have spoken to women who were filmed unaware that they were actually being filmed or photographed at the time, and then these images go online, and yet there isn't the sympathy that you would expect in relation to other crimes of a sexual nature in relation to this when it comes to reporting to the authorities, is there? No, and the thing is, it's still a huge violation of consent. I think we have to reframe this as a sexual abuse crime, because at the minute it's just not being treated as such. And to be honest, it's so normalized in society, like especially among young people. Everyone's sharing photos. We're basically the first generation to really grow up with social media and a pocket in our phones constantly, and we don't have the education there on what could happen, and a society that really, it is rape culture as well, likes to shame women, and there normally are done to, like, it's shared to shame women. And until all of these factors are kind of addressed, I don't think there'll be any real change. And can I also add, as a journalist who reports on these kind of cases, if I was to report on any other crime of a sexual nature, the victim or the complainant in that case is entitled to lifelong anonymity, and that is only revealed if they choose themselves to reveal it. And that doesn't matter whether or not that the accused is found guilty or not, regardless of the outcome of that criminal case. The witness in that case, the complainant, will be entitled to lifelong anonymity. That is not the case when it comes to image-based sexual abuse. In the North, it's obviously comes under Misuse of the Communications Act, and those offences do not carry anonymity, which is something I feel really strongly about, because as we know in your case and in every other case, that the sharing of these images is not just about the sexual abuse of that, it is the coercive control element of that. These images are hard. Often women find themselves stuck in abusive relationships they can't escape, because the person who has these images uses them and holds them over them as a threat, that they will use them if they report them, if they leave them, if they, you know, try and go elsewhere and try and make any life for themselves. I will send these to your boss, I will send them to your mother, I will post them online, and yet it's not being treated in the same way that other sexual based offences are. I think as well, people think when those photos go up online, and I think that this is something a lot of people don't realise, it's not just the abusive partner now has access to them. Countless people on the internet now have access to them. So the amount of people who get blackmailed with their photos, I'd say, people have tried to do it to me countless times, but there's also other people that have said to me, well, some guys after taking my photos, and now he's threatening me with them unless I send him photos. So it's a control element as well. I do think in the Republic this is going to be treated as a sexual abuse crime. I fought very hard for that because it needs the same safeguards, and it is about consent, and it is a violation of consent. So I am, as far as I'm aware, I think the anonymity is okay in the South. I think that you can stay anonymous if you want, and I think that was something that had to be done.
Yeah, it does, because as you say, part of the abuse here is the fact that society still views women with to a lesser degree. It holds them to higher standards, and so there's the shame that was attached to that, which clearly you felt not only the distress and shame of it, but it took you to a very dark place, didn't it?
Yeah, very bad. I did try to take my life, but I thought my life was over when this happened to me, because I thought I'm never going to be able to get a job. My family were incredibly unhappy. It was sent to them. The level of it was awful. And then you think these images are out there forever. And now my name is also tainted. As I saw it, I thought, wow, everyone's just going to view me this one way for the rest of my life. And I really honestly thought my life was over. And I have to say that's an experience that is shared with many of the people who reach out to me. Mostly women do say that they think that their life is over. They don't see a future for themselves now, or they're after ruining it. And until we change that, society is the only thing that can change that.
I think it's very important, because there are obviously people who are maybe watching this who have been in a similar situation, or could possibly find themselves not, or will find themselves working with someone in a similar situation, to say that all is not hopeless, and you turned your situation in something that was incredibly negative into something very positive when you decided to fight back. Can you tell us what brought that about? And obviously I'm impressed by your strength, but can you remember the sort of turning point when you decided, no, I'm not going to just lie down and give up, I am going to fight back against this?
It came to a point where I was trying to reframe the conversation in my head. So I had to think that this wasn't something that I had done. This is something that was done to me. I did nothing wrong sending someone a picture. The issue was that had been shared without my consent. So I reframed that in my head. And then, to be honest, I had so many people reaching out to me that I was like, we can't take this lying down. The level of people impacted by this is too big. And if not me, then somebody else next week. And I said, if we don't do this, someone could end up dead from the abuse, and already have. And until it was about reframing the conversation, though. And I think when the education is there and you realize your life isn't over, to be honest, because the conversation is changing, I get more support than I do backlash. And I think as the conversation continues to change, it is a very positive thing. And it can be, you can use it to raise awareness. And the more open we get about these conversations, the more normalized it is, and the better things will become.
Yeah, and while it shouldn't ever have to be the case, I think that sometimes when you do, as you have done, empower yourself and say, no, I will not be shamed by this. I will not allow myself to be shamed by that. You remove the power, don't you, from the person who is holding that over you?
Yeah, absolutely. I had people sending me my photos to try to shame me with them and say, well, what are you doing sharing photos, and then blame me for it, and then use them and say, well, if you don't send me more photos, I'm going to release them. And I said, do it. I said, they're already out there. What you like? And then I think that was the turning point was, this is actually wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. This person's in the wrong. And I said, I'm going to fight back against the entire culture. And now there's a whole army of women in the Republic of Ireland who feel the same way and are taking the power back and are speaking out. So it's amazing then for the people who don't feel like they can, to have people to listen to.
And the legislative change, explain that and what impact you hope that will have when that comes into force. When is this new legislation expected to come into force in the South?
Yeah, so we had no laws at all in Ireland, nothing until just about before Christmas. It was sitting there since 2017. There was just no real push to implement the legislation. So I started the petition and called for laws, and we did a lot of amendments to the law. It is based around consent, which I think is the most important thing. So there's a lesser, there's a lesser criminal conviction if you share them without the intent to cause harm. So it's 6 months, I think, in prison and a €5,000 fine. And then there's another one for with intent to cause harm. So if you purposefully do that to shame that person or to cause harm, then I think it's 7 years is the maximum sentence. So I think that that's amazing. I'm hoping with the legislation that victims of this feel like they can at least do something, because all along there was nothing the guards could do because there was no legislation in place. It was not a crime. I think with the more people who report, the more education will be out there as well. We can see how it's handled, make sure it's handled properly, and then you can put supports and everything in place. But without the law, really, it's just something that's happening beneath the surface that's not really tackled at all.
And can you explain, obviously you'd said about the amendments in the law. I know from, you know, we're currently having changes to the domestic abuse bill and hopefully stalking legislation, and it's only when, you know, as victims that you meet with the people who are in charge of forming that legislation, because often they miss aspects of the law that could slip through and make the law then inadequate without actually consulting with the victims. But you managed to play a consultative role, didn't you, and discuss some of the aspects of the legislation that you felt were essential?
Oh, I wrote out amendments for every single bit of the law, and I said there's one bit I won't tolerate, and that's the intent to cause harm. And there was a few other bits as well that had to be changed. Now, I have to say the law in the Republic is not perfect, because at the end of the day, it's up to government what they implement and what they don't. It's not perfect. There's a few slight issues, but it'll do. It's strong enough that hopefully, if this is implemented, it will be enough to make a solid change. And then there's another review in 2 years, because there's a 2-year statute of limitations from when the person finds out about their images. But we will get a review in before then, hopefully in a year and a half, to make sure everything is handled correctly. It's just up to the guards now to implement this legislation and have the right approach to victims.
That's what I was going to come on to next, because legislation is wonderful and it's a great thing to have those laws to protect, but without proper training of the guards, the PSNI, without proper training of the courts, of the judicial system, of all of those aspects of that to ensure that these laws are both properly enacted and understood, it's just a piece of paper really on the statute, isn't it? So it's really important that there's training comes with this, and you've been assured that there will be training on the ground before this legislation comes into effect, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I've made sure that was one of the most important things, because education on this now is incredibly important. And I have been assured that there is training being rolled out to all of the guards on how to deal with this issue. And I think there's even a task force being set up. So it's actions will speak louder than words, but so far I have been assured that it will be taken seriously. So I hope it will.
And we had discussed on the phone before this, and in my own experience, I always say if you're reporting domestic abuse crimes of any kind, it is like a Russian roulette, whether you get the good, the bad, or the ugly of the police. You know, you can get a wonderful one and you can get a bad one. And in my case, I said, you remember a female officer saying to me, "What have you done on this man to make him so mad? Like, what have you done? You wound him up, haven't you?" And I mean, that was the words to me when she came through my door. So that training to make sure that women who report crime get a consistent approach across the board is so happy, and that you're not having to rely on luck, that you actually get a good officer that day or a bad officer.
I think that there needs to be some sort of system that women can make reports about that, because at the minute, who are the guards held accountable to? They can say whatever they really like to victims, but they're not going to get in trouble for it. If they do anything like that, and the education and the training isn't there on how to handle these things, the amount of people I know who have gone in who have been told complete misinformation. So there's going to need to be a huge overhaul. I think that when it comes into action and they see the level of people reporting it, hopefully they do take it seriously, and then it's about pushing for education next on a societal level.
Yeah, and now where are you at now? Explain now. I mean, you seem like someone who is full of positivity and strength. Have you managed to repair the damage done, and do you feel stronger for it?
I do feel stronger for it. I think that it's not for me. None of this was for me, but I have now helped countless people who have reached out to me or through the legislation and will be impacted by this in the future just by me standing up. So many people said that they were afraid to ever speak about it to anyone because they felt so ashamed, and to see somebody stand up and say, "No, I did nothing wrong," really changed the narrative in their mind. And I think that that's the most important thing.
What also too, I suppose, and I take this from my own point of view, from a member of the media, that there's training in how this is reported. I mean, I had been involved with Women's Aid and trying to come up with the guidelines, the media reporting guidelines, and one of the things that we spent a long time trying to come up with a better way to explain it was the use of revenge porn, which indicates by using the word revenge that someone has done something wrong that they need to have revenge taken on them for, and trying to stop that being used. I mean, while image-based sexual abuse is what we're actually dealing with here, it reminded me of my early days as a journalist when we used the term joyride instead of death drivers. And it's trying obviously to ensure that the media as well, and people like myself, take on board when we do make a mistake.
Yeah,
Actually, and sometimes the headlines, and I'm sure in some of the headlines are being aimed at trying to get someone to click on that story rather than actually present the case. It's important too that training, I suppose, we have to take it on my chin when people like myself also need to realise that the harm that can be done when reporting these stories if not done accurately.
I do think that that is important, but to be honest, I think that this is an issue that people are only really starting to get educated on now. So I think it's about moving forward rather than looking back and saying, look, I'd say we'd all probably made mistakes at some point. You know, you get a photo sent to you and you don't think anything of it, or you see somebody else doing it. And it's about changing that now and saying, okay, this is unacceptable. How can we go forward in this? In my own petition, I called it revenge porn because image-based sexual abuse just wasn't a commonly known term, unfortunately. So I said revenge porn, but then every single time I spoke and underneath the headline was, don't refer to this as revenge porn, refer to it as image-based sexual abuse. But revenge porn is catchy and I needed the awareness more than I needed the correct grammar, unfortunately.
And it is, and I mean, it's difficult when you're in a profession like mine, whereas, a sub-editor writing a headline is going to go for a catchier headline. You're trying to explain them that could cause damage, because they're all about this is about victim shaming. And the last thing that we should be doing if we're trying to progress this issue is someone to tell
them. It shames them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the language around it is very important, and I've spoken out against it constantly. I know my petition was called revenge porn, but I had it in brackets, and I did have it's called image-based sexual abuse and the reasoning. But to be honest, until people know, if you said to someone on the street, image-based sexual abuse, they're going to say, what's that? Yeah. Because until the education is out there, unfortunately, it was picked up as this catchy title. And as wrong as that is, it's about reframing the narrative now and pushing the education so people know it's not revenge porn. Nobody did anything wrong. It's a matter of consent, and it is image-based, and it is sexual abuse.
And this is something that I'm sure you feel strongly that we should be teaching young people from a school age, and not just young women in how to protect themselves, but young men as well.
I've said it time and time again. So, okay, I would say more than 9 out of 10 times the victim is a woman, because it is a very misogynistic crime. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen to men. It just happens at a way disproportionate rate to women. But the thing is now, young men or whoever is sharing out these photos can now also go to prison. So it is important to educate our young people, not only for the harm that's done to the victim, but also now the harm that's done to the perpetrator. And I don't think anybody wants to be locking up 16-year-olds, and because it is, if there's no education there, I don't think that they can understand the consent around it or the legalities around it. And we have to start pushing for that in all schools, even around, there's no education really around internet in general, like grooming or the dangers of the internet and sex. And I think everyone's going around with their phone in their pockets now, which also opens them up to a multitude of dangers for loads of reasons, and proper consent education, because in the Republic it's not up to scratch.
No, and it's not. And I know from north of the border we're probably even further behind than ourselves, and in some of the cases, and very few of the cases where people have managed to get those cases, they've had to leave, and that goes back to the Gillen report. So we have cases where you can report, and the complainant and the victim in that case can ask for anonymity, but their name is used in open court, and therefore anyone who's sitting in the public gallery can clearly, Google their name or go on Facebook and check who they are. So there's a whole range of protections need to put in place so that it's not just, yes, you can have anonymity and it can't be reported in the media, because the mainstream media in a lot of cases is not where a lot of the shaming goes on. It is on social media. And so
I think that there's an added level when it's image-based sexual abuse, because you have to remember, you're making a person's name public. Their photos are probably readily accessible on the internet. When I started speaking out publicly, they made my name trend #1 on Pornhub because they were trying to find access to view my images. So by sharing that person's name, you're then putting them at risk of a ton more harm, and their images being shared around again, because as soon as someone's name is brought up, people are going to Google, people are going to look, because they have no boundaries. But that is something that has to be taken into account as well. That there's going to be someone out there with those images, and then all of a sudden someone's name is in the media, there's a high chance they're going to be shared again. And even when you speak out, you know that. The amount of people that spoke out during the leak and then had their images shared with them, or people trying to hack into their accounts to silence them, was absolutely crazy.
And in relation to those big companies and the companies who do, as you say, monetize this and make money for this, I mean, do you believe that there should be redress for those victims, that they should be held to account and have to pay compensation in relation to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that Pornhub and a few other websites have now had to change it so that not anybody can upload. It has to be verified creators, which is a start. But unfortunately, the stress caused to these people, they're absolutely entitled to compensation, especially if someone else is profiting off it. Now, I know generally if you go through something like this, it's still grounds for a civil case. But then if someone doesn't have access to bring a civil case, you're kind of in the dark. So yeah, they do absolutely deserve compensation.
Yeah, because we know that in cases like this, the problem of, you know, protecting women and children is never usually that high on the priority of these big companies. But when it does come to hitting them in the pocket, that's when we'll see real change. We know that, you know, in terms of Yahoo and or YouTube and Facebook, they managed to remove so many far right sites and users when it came to the point where advertisers were threatening to pull the advertising. So I think there's scope there to put pressure on people who advertise with these sites to ensure that they say we.
Unfortunately, they didn't do anything until I think it was Visa or one of the big banks threatened to pull out and not support them anymore, and then all of a sudden policy changes. So unfortunately, they don't care about victims, they care about money.
They do, they care about money. I'm going to look through the questions just to see if there's any questions here that I think that you'd be able to answer. I do notice that someone had said, do you think that there should also, the training should also be extended to prison staff? Well, I mean, I think that in terms of if someone is jailed for a crime like this, and usually that would be someone who would be considered to have met the threshold for prison, that there should be training that to be given, because that person obviously is an offender who's offended in a sexual way. The problem that we have found with sentencing in the north, I'm not sure what way it is in the south, is that judges are tied that they can either sentence someone to an offenders treatment program or a prison sentence, and there wasn't any scope for giving joint sentences where someone should serve a prison sentence so that there's consequences to their actions, but also be forced to take part in training programs afterwards, because the training and the changing in behaviour and attitudes is very important, not just for the person who's committed this crime, but also for people who may consider doing it in the future, so that they can see.
I would absolutely agree with all of that, honestly. I think just locking people up when it's a crime like this that people aren't really aware of isn't going to help anything anyway. I think that there should be, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't educated on consent. You know, they don't understand it. And as horrible as that is, and you would think you'd have enough respect for a person until that education is there. And I think it should be implemented basically everywhere. I think at every step, youth clubs, school, anywhere possible, really.
Yeah, with those consent. And I know that there are some people who are doing training programs for young people. They can roll those out after a certain time. But would it be something that you would like to be involved in the future? Because obviously someone coming into a school to train you has no first-hand experience of this would be helpful. But I think that young people would really relate to someone like yourself who's been through this. Is that something you would like to do in the future?
I'm recording a talk this week for, I think it's 11,000 transition years. So yeah, it's going to be something, I'm not 100% sure on that yet, but yeah, I want to try and roll out education for as many young people as possible, because that's the only way we're going to see change. Honestly, it is.
And then speaking out about this, I know that you've helped so many people. You're still inundated, aren't you, weekly with other people who have been been through this, and obviously give so much time to helping other women who are in a similar situation.
Yeah, to be honest, like I've had so many people reach out to me. I can't even explain. I had 3 yesterday. I'm not qualified to give proper support. I have nearly finished a psychology degree and I have like the necessary training, but all I can do is offer and say, look, I've been through it, and offer the support, and just help them report it or whatever. It's just a tough one because there's no actual real supports in place that, you know, are qualified and can handle this as it's meant to be. You know, it's very easy to approach it from a victim standpoint, but I think that there's added levels to this because of the repeated traumas and all the rest, that I think it's proven quite difficult to be able to get the support that is needed.
Well, listen, I think we've come to an end of our time. I just like to thank Megan for someone who's so young and has been through so much. You know, I'm in awe of the way you can speak out. You know, women who are twice your age, including myself, wouldn't have the bravery to speak in the way you have, and I'm really, really proud of you, and I'm sure everybody else is too.